Hi, I'm Sophia.
They told me I was a contender. For months, they dropped hints like breadcrumbs, comments in meetings, extra assignments, quiet nods of approval when I solved problems no one else noticed. I had been with the company for 8 years. 8 years of late nights, skipped vacations, and fixing other people's mistakes while making it all look easy. I didn't need a gold star. I didn't need applause. I just wanted the role I had earned, the recognition I had waited patiently for. But I should have known. The signs were there, subtle at first. The way Mr. Carter started asking for Alex in meetings even when I was present. The way the team slowly shifted their questions to him, not because he had the answers, but because they had been told he would soon. And then came the invitation. Not a one-on-one meeting, not an email about the promotion I had worked for, but a company-wide invite to a surprise announcement and celebration. The subject line felt like a smile hiding a knife. I wore my best blazer that day. Deep green, structured, elegant. I stood in the mirror that morning, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear and telling myself, it's going to happen. They wouldn't be throwing a party if it weren't for you. I even dared to imagine my name on the door, my title under the CEO's announcement. I dared to imagine calling my mother after, hearing her proud silence that always came before she whispered, I knew you would. But reality doesn't dress itself up for your dreams. When I stepped into the main hall, I already knew. The eyes that met mine were too careful. The smiles, too sympathetic. I took my seat near the front and saw the name on the reserved card beside the podium. Alex Bennett. My brother. I don't remember the speech word for word. I remember the words legacy and trust, and who better to lead us into the future than someone who understands both the business and the family behind it? My hands were still, but my jaw tightened with every word. My brother stood beside Mr. Carter, like he had been waiting his whole life for this. Maybe he had. Maybe I was the only fool who believed in merit over bloodline. I clapped when the room clapped. I smiled when the cameras turned our way. I stood beside him when they asked for a family photo, though I felt like a stranger inside my own skin. After the party, I walked to my car like I was underwater. My heels clicked softly against the concrete, but the noise felt distant. In the driver's seat, I sat for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine. There were no tears. Not yet. Just a sharpness in my chest that felt like it had always been there, waiting to remind me that I had never been part of the plan. I was the practice round, the scaffolding, the bridge they built to get him to the top. And now that he was there, they no longer needed the structure beneath. I drove home on autopilot, the city lights blurring past me like missed chances. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, rereading old emails, project proposals, budget plans, proof of the work I had done. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for fuel. Something in me had shifted. Not broken, but bent just enough to change shape. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explain. They had made a decision, but they had forgotten who taught Alex everything he knew. They forgot who ran the systems, who built the back-end frameworks, who negotiated the supplier terms that saved them $500,000 last year. They forgot me. And they were about to remember. The next morning, I showed up at the office before anyone else. I walked through the lobby with my badge held high like armor. The receptionist, newly hired, gave me a small smile.
She didn't know.
Most of them didn't. Inside the elevator, I checked my reflection.
Calm.
Focused. Not a single crack. I wasn't here to confront anyone. I was here for my files. The ones I had created, stored, backed up with discipline they had underestimated. My digital fingerprints were on every system, CRM, vendor contracts, the internal dashboard Alex claimed to have improved. They wouldn't realize how much was mine until it was gone. I didn't delete anything. That wasn't necessary. I just made copies. Quietly. Thoroughly. By noon, I had everything I needed. I didn't resign. I didn't cause a scene. I simply left at 4:30 p.m. and didn't return. Not the next day. Not the next week. I turned off my work phone. Let the silence speak for me. 3 days later, I received a message from one of my interns. They're struggling with the Q3 presentation files. They can't find the original layouts. I almost laughed. The layouts were on my external drive, labeled and archived. They weren't even encrypted. They were just invisible to those who had never bothered to look. The intern added, "Also, your brother asked if you could just send over the supplier contacts. Says it'll save him time." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new document and started writing. It wasn't a resignation letter. It was a plan. The truth is, I never wanted to own a company. I was good at systems, at execution, at building structures that held weight. But something about being replaced, being erased, awakened a new instinct in me. Not vengeance.
Clarity.
If they didn't value what I built, I would build somewhere else. And then, I'd build something bigger. I started small. I called 2 former vendors I had trusted for years, ones I had brought into the Bennett and Carter fold with promises of long-term partnerships. I asked them for a meeting. No formal pitch, just coffee. They came. One brought his partner. The other brought 2 new clients to the cafe where we met. Within an hour, I knew I had something more than leverage. I had reputation. I had loyalty. I had options. Over the next few weeks, I became a ghost in their system and a whisper in the industry. They didn't see me, but they heard about me. "Have you talked to her? She's working on something. I heard she might be forming her own firm." I didn't confirm or deny. I let the mystery grow, let the tension build like steam behind a sealed door. Meanwhile, I worked. Quietly. Furiously. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. My apartment turned into a makeshift war room. Whiteboards with timelines, spreadsheets taped to the wall, sticky notes with initials and arrows pointing in every direction. I didn't even realize how deep I was until my best friend dropped by and said, "You look different." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. I was becoming someone new. Someone focused, deliberate, and dangerously underestimated. They invited me to the holiday gala. As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't been replaced by the brother I trained. I almost didn't go. But then I realized, sometimes the best place to make an entrance is the one where they assume you've already exited. I arrived in a black dress, no jewelry, no purse, just me, and the knowledge of everything they didn't know yet. My brother greeted me at the door, glass of champagne in hand. He smiled like nothing had changed. I smiled back like everything had. The room was full. Partners, clients, friends of the firm. I walked slowly, deliberately, pausing at clusters of conversations I had once been central to. People noticed. They didn't say much, but their eyes tracked me. I made my way to the bar, ordered a soda water, and waited. When the music dipped and the microphone came out, I knew it was time. Mr. Carter took the stage and gave the usual year-end speech. He thanked the team, applauded the clients, and praised the next generation of leadership for their seamless transition. Then came the words that made the glass in my hand tremble ever so slightly. "And finally, we want to thank our new managing director, Alex Bennett, for stepping into this role with such poise and clarity. We couldn't have imagined a better leader to take us forward." My brother smiled, lifted his glass, and nodded like a king receiving tribute. The room clapped. I sipped my drink. They thought the story had ended. They didn't know it had just begun. The applause that night echoed longer than it needed to. Not because the speech was powerful, but because everyone in the room was trained to clap when money spoke. I stood there, still, poised, and completely invisible in their eyes. It was a perfect illusion. That's what made it powerful. The most dangerous person in the room is the one they think doesn't exist. And I had been preparing for this moment since the day they pushed me out with champagne flutes and fake smiles. The moment the music picked up again, I slipped out onto the balcony. The air was cold, brisk, but clean. It felt good to breathe. I checked my phone. One notification. A message from my attorney. Everything's confirmed. Board purchase finalized. Legal notice scheduled for delivery. 8 a.m. Monday. I let the words sink in, not for drama, but for grounding. I wasn't imagining this. I had done it. Quietly. Legally. Thoroughly. I had used the severance bonus they gave me as seed capital. I sold my apartment, liquidated the portfolio I'd built from years of modest savings, and partnered with two mid-tier investors who owed me more than a favor. It had taken 6 weeks, hundreds of pages of contracts, and one board member willing to sell for far less than his stake was worth. Turns out, divorces are expensive. So are gambling debts. I didn't buy the whole company. Not yet. I didn't need to. I bought 19%. Enough to call an emergency board meeting with proper cause. Enough to submit an injunction to freeze executive authority pending a leadership investigation. Enough to scare the hell out of the man who gave my brother my chair. Back inside, Alex was laughing with someone from marketing. He wore the role like a costume, tailored, polished, empty. I watched him from across the room, not with envy, not with rage, but with a strange sense of detachment. He had no idea that everything he was holding was slipping through his fingers one digit at a time. I walked out without saying goodbye. The next morning, my name was trending, not on gossip blogs, but in the internal chatter of Bennett and Carter. Word had leaked. The company database reflected a new investor holding, LJ Holdings LLC. No one knew it was me yet, but they would. Monday came faster than expected. At exactly 8 a.m., a courier delivered 3 legal envelopes to the reception desk at Bennett and Carter. One for Mr. Carter, one for the acting director of operations, and one addressed to the board liaison. All identical. All stamped with the seal of the firm representing LJ Holdings. Inside was a single-page letter. In light of recent restructuring, and in accordance with Article 9B of the shareholder agreement, LJ Holdings requests a formal inquiry into executive appointment processes and ownership transparency. In other words, I see what you did, and I have the power to expose it. Within hours, my phone rang. Mr. Carter himself. I let it go to voicemail. Later that day, I got another call, this one from the board chair's assistant. Would you be open to a private discussion before the next general meeting? I replied with a time. Thursday, 4 p.m., and a location, my office. My new one. Downtown, 34th floor, glass walls and silence. Built with the same intention I'd used in every project. Quiet strength. No wasted space. Thursday came. They showed up on time. Mr. Carter, 2 board members, and Alex, still clinging to his new title. I didn't offer coffee. I offered seats. I laid out the facts. The documents. The votes skipped. The memo trails that proved Alex had been appointed without full compliance. It won't hold up in court, Carter said, trying to sound unfazed. I smiled softly. It doesn't have to. It only needs to last long enough for your clients to start asking why it was hidden in the first place.
He didn't reply.
That's when Alex spoke. For the first time, his voice cracked, not loud, not panicked, just uneven. Why are you doing this? We're family. I almost laughed. Family? Was that before or after you took the job you knew I built for 10 years? I looked at him, with nothing left to give. This isn't personal. This is math. I added value. You subtracted it. Now, I'm correcting the equation. That night, news broke. Industry blogs, startup forums, even LinkedIn. Bennett and Carter was under inquiry by a minority stakeholder claiming executive malpractice. The comments exploded. Some defended the company. Many didn't. And the whispers grew. She's not backing down.
She knows something.
She's playing the long game. 2 days later, the real twist dropped. The supplier I had brought to the firm, one of the biggest in our logistics chain, sent a public statement. They were pulling out of their contract due to trust violations regarding leadership restructuring. In other words, they picked a side.
Meaning?
The dominoes began to fall. Clients reached out privately, asking for meetings. Former employees sent support messages, quietly cheering. But the most surprising came in the form of a letter. Handwritten. From the last person I expected. My father. A man who had remained distant through most of my career. A man who had always quietly favored Alex because he had more presence. The note was short. Just 10 words. They gave him the stage. You built the theater. I see it now. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the drawer beside my grandfather's pen, and sat in the silence that follows being truly seen. But it wasn't over. Alex wasn't done. They launched a counterattack. A press release from the company's legal team stated that LJ Holdings was a disgruntled former employee using investment as retaliation. They denied any malpractice and even hinted at questionable activity from the former employee during her tenure. I read it 3 times, calmly, then sent it straight to my attorney. We filed a cease and desist, followed by a motion to compel transparency in the executive records. In response, they tried to freeze my shares. It failed. Public sentiment had already shifted. Quietly, internally, people were choosing their side. And not because of loyalty, because of results. The numbers don't lie. I had built the client base. I had secured the margins. I had designed the operational backbone. And now, stripped of that foundation, they were bleeding slowly. Then came the opportunity one hadn't expected. The company's biggest institutional investor, a quiet, discreet partner out of Zurich, requested a meeting. I flew out, presented my numbers, my plan, my roadmap for restructuring, and the future of a company that no longer knew how to operate without its architect. They asked one question. What would you do if you had full control? I answered without hesitation. I'd turn it into something no one could take from another builder again. 3 days later, the Zurich firm offered me something no one else had, a bridge loan to purchase the remaining shares required to gain controlling interest. I signed the papers that Friday. By Monday, I owned 52%. At exactly 7:03 p.m., during the annual spring promotion gala, I walked through the front doors of the same ballroom where they once toasted my brother in my name. This time, I was wearing white.
Clean.
Sharp. Unapologetic. The music paused. Mr. Carter stopped mid-sentence when he saw me.
I didn't ask for the mic.
I didn't need to. The screens around the room flickered to life. The company logo disappeared. A new slide appeared. One title, black on white, ownership transfer, effective immediately. Underneath my name. The gasps weren't dramatic. They were quiet, sharp, like a crack through porcelain. I walked to the stage.
Calm.
Grounded. My heels sounded different this time, less like echoes, more like arrival. I didn't smile for the cameras. I looked at the faces in front of me, all the people who had once ignored the scaffolding beneath their shining towers. And I said one thing, let's rebuild. No one clapped at first. Then someone did. Then another. And suddenly the room shook, not with applause, but with the realization that they had bet on the wrong story. But mine was just getting started. The silence after that applause was louder than any cheer. It was the kind that sinks into people's bones, the kind that rewrites history in real time. I didn't need validation. I had documents for that. I needed acknowledgement, and I got it the moment their eyes shifted. First with confusion, then discomfort, and finally recognition. The woman they had ghosted, the strategist they had silenced, had just become their employer. I stepped off the stage with no expression, no drama, just direction. My new executive assistant met me at the base of the stairs and handed me the updated binder, divisions, budget forecasts, revised organizational charts. I had spent months preparing for this exact moment. No one knew it, but every late night, every ignored pitch, every backhanded compliment had been part of the strategy. This wasn't revenge. It was recalibration. I didn't come to burn the company down. I came to remove the parts that had rotted quietly while pretending to lead. I called a full executive review for Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. No speeches, no press. Just internal correction. I sent the invites myself. I wanted them to know I hadn't outsourced the hard parts. That's what leaders do, face what others avoid. My brother was among the first to reply. I'll be there, he wrote.
No emotion.
Just presence. He knew the tide had shifted, but not how deep the current ran. When I walked into the conference room that morning, I noticed something that made me pause. My chair, the one they had taken from my office and replaced with something more aesthetic, was back. The one with the worn armrest and the small crack on the left leg. I ran my fingers across the edge as I sat. It wasn't the chair that mattered. It was what I'd done without it that proved its value. The room was quiet. I looked at the people who had once overlooked me, and I began. I won't repeat the past, I said. That means we don't pretend everything is fine while fractures spread under the surface. This company succeeded because we built systems based on relationships, not shortcuts. I'm restoring that. No one interrupted. No one dared. I continued. 3 departments will be reviewed. Procurement, legal, development. If you've done your work with transparency, you have nothing to worry about. If you haven't, now's your chance to come clean. If I have to find it myself, it's over. And then I turned to Alex. As of today, your title is suspended pending further review. You're welcome to stay and participate. Or leave.
He didn't speak.
He didn't protest. He simply leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. For the first time, he looked like someone who had lost something he didn't fully understand. After the meeting, I stayed behind and looked out the window. The city below was busy, loud, alive.
So was I.
It felt different now, less like a battlefield and more like territory. I had finally earned the right to walk freely. But power has a way of drawing fire. 2 days later, an anonymous whistleblower report surfaced, claiming insider trading and misuse of company data during the transition. It didn't take long to figure out who had planted it. The language was too precise, too familiar. Alex had a habit of writing sentences like arguments, building them up like scaffolding, as if daring someone to knock them down. I knew the rhythm, and this report had his fingerprints all over it. My legal team immediately filed a statement of denial, backed by digital audit trails. The report unraveled within 48 hours, proven to be manufactured. But the damage wasn't the goal. The distraction was. He wanted me off balance. He failed. I met with a compliance head personally, outlined a policy overhaul, and initiated a full transparency protocol, open chain accountability, department-level disclosures, rotating audits. It wasn't flashy, but it was structure. The kind of foundation no one could quietly dismantle. That same week, I received an invitation to speak at a global tech summit. We'd love to hear your story, the organizer wrote, especially after the headlines. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the story they wanted. They wanted the drama, the betrayal, the sister versus brother, David versus Goliath narrative. But that's not what I had built. What I had wasn't war. It was a new system, one that ran deeper than legacy or name or blood. Still, I said yes. The day of the summit, I stood backstage watching other speakers rehearse. Polished, perfect, full of buzzwords and branding. When my name was called, I walked out without a script. Just the truth. I was replaced. I began. Not because I failed, but because someone decided the story would look better with a man at the front. And for a while, they made it stick. But the truth has a way of waiting. It's quiet, but it doesn't fade. I didn't mention names. I didn't accuse. I spoke of systems, of overlooked talent, of what happens when we mistake presentation for value. I ended with this. Sometimes, the best thing someone can do is remove you from their version of success. Because it gives you space to build your own. The room stood when I finished. Not because I had delivered a performance, but because I had spoken something they recognized, maybe even lived. I walked off stage into silence. The good kind. The kind that follows truth when it finally gets air. But the final twist came later. A small package arrived at my office a week after the summit. No name. No return address. Inside was a USB. I had it scanned, cleared, checked. Then I opened it. There was only one file. A video recording from over a year ago. A meeting between Alex and 2 external contractors. One of them suggested adjusting a pricing algorithm to inflate margins. Alex didn't say no. In fact, he added to the idea. It's not illegal if it's buried deep enough. That's what he said. That's what the audio captured. I watched it twice. Then again. I didn't send it to legal right away. I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. You sent it, didn't you? I asked. A pause. Then, I didn't think you'd win. I thought they'd listen to me. They always did. You're right, I said. They did. Until now.
He didn't respond. You should resign, I said.
Today.
Publicly.
And if you do, I won't release the file. Another pause. Then, you'd really let me walk away clean? No, I said. I'm letting you walk away quiet. An hour later, his resignation hit every inbox in the company.
No explanation.
No exit interview. Just gone. I never released the file. Not because I forgave him, but because sometimes the real victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's making sure they never get another chance to do harm. It's been 6 months now. The company is stable, profitable, quiet. We've restructured, rebuilt, redefined. We launched a mentorship program for overlooked talent. We've implemented a voice equity system. Every major proposal must be presented by at least one junior contributor. But most of all, we've stopped pretending legacy equals leadership. My name is on the door now. Not as a symbol, as a system. One I built. One no one can take credit for again. And when people ask how I did it, I tell them this. They replaced me with my brother. At the promotion party, I smiled. And then, quietly, I bought the company. People think taking over a company is the final victory. They imagine it like a crown being placed on your head, applause surrounding you as you sit on the throne that was once denied to you. But the truth is, taking over is just the beginning. Power isn't given, it's tested. And the moment I became majority owner, the test started. Some were subtle. A delayed compliance report. A vendor suddenly losing paperwork. An email chain mysteriously dropping my name. Other challenges were more direct. An anonymous complaint alleging a hostile takeover. An external audit request from a firm I'd never contracted. Every move had fingerprints, and though no one signed their name, the message was clear. They wanted me to fall. But I wasn't surprised. I had built my entire career in the shadows of men who smiled in meetings and sharpened knives after. I knew how to fight without shouting.
So I stayed quiet.
I watched. I documented. And, behind the scenes, I prepared the next move. One night, around 11:30 p.m., as I sat in my office reviewing internal communication logs flagged by the new integrity team I'd quietly assembled, I found it. A conversation between two mid-level directors. One of them had been at the company since my intern days, always loyal to Carter, always dismissive of my input. The other was new, hired shortly after my takeover, but already making connections. Their thread was casual at first. Small talk about the new protocols, the leadership shift. But then the older one said something that made me sit up straight. She's buying time. Wait until Q2, when the merger plan hits. She won't survive that storm. The younger one replied, already ahead of you. Zurich's backing her for now, but their vote can flip if we create enough instability. Merger? Vote flipping? Zurich? I had never greenlit any merger. I had explicitly shelved the exploratory talks initiated during Alex's brief tenure. So how were they so sure it would be back on the table? Unless someone was still running those talks behind my back. I called Raphael. He picked up immediately, even though it was past midnight. He didn't say hello. Just asked, what did you find? I told him. He sighed. Check the shell firm names from the last proposal Alex drafted. Look for a name that ends in Group Solutions. He parked it there, probably hoping it would stay hidden. It took less than 10 minutes to trace it. The firm was listed as a consulting partner for several non-core projects, research, digital asset management, advisory support. But the invoices were vague, duplicated, and suspiciously timed around the period right before my acquisition. Buried in those files was a single clause attached to a dormant contract, pre-approval for merger reactivation upon 3-month shareholder silence. In other words, if I didn't actively cancel it within 90 days, the proposal could resurface without needing another vote. And I had been in charge for 82 days. I stared at the screen. No blinking cursor, no dramatic warning. Just the quiet truth. I had 8 days to stop a hostile merger I didn't authorize that could dilute my control, devalue the company, and possibly push me out through a loophole built during my brother's fake reign. That week was a war. I met with Zurich. I presented every shred of internal deception. I reactivated the clause under board authority and canceled it officially, then issued a full transparency statement to the board outlining how legacy processes had been abused by previous leadership. Some nodded with embarrassment. Others tried to deflect. I didn't let them. And then I made a decision. The next day, I called a press briefing. Not a glossy event, not a PR stunt. Just me, a microphone, and a handful of reporters who'd followed the story since the beginning. I laid it all out, how the merger proposal had been a remnant of an unethical transition, how internal silos allowed it to nearly pass unnoticed, and how companies often rely so heavily on inherited systems that they forget to question who built them and why. It was direct. It was sharp. It didn't name names, but it left no doubt. I didn't do it for drama. I did it to create record. Because I knew what was coming. 2 days later, my brother filed a petition to reopen the executive review, citing abuse of power, intimidation, and improper handling of shareholder influence. He filed it through a third party, cloaked in the name of employee rights, but the signature on the final page gave it away. He still thought he could win. My attorney called. "We can dismiss this easily," she said. "You have every document, every audit, every system report. But if you want to close the chapter for good, there's another way." And so, I took the harder path. Instead of dismissing the review, I invited it. I opened every file, every report, every policy update. I held a public shareholders forum, a voluntary meeting streamed live, open to employee questions, investor feedback, and external observers. No secrets. No behind-the-curtain deals. Just light. The questions were sharp. Some were skeptical. Some deeply personal. "Why didn't you leave when they pushed you out?" one asked. I answered simply. "Because when you've built something with your own hands, walking away feels like handing your name to someone who doesn't deserve it." That answer spread further than any headline ever had. The next week, the petition was withdrawn. No explanation. Just silence. But the final twist wasn't about Alex. It wasn't even about the company. It came from a voice I hadn't heard in years. A call from an unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but I answered. It was my mother. Her voice was soft. Tired. "I read about everything," she said. I waited. I didn't know what she was calling to say. Approval? Regret? A warning? But then she whispered something I never thought I'd hear. "I'm sorry, I never saw how hard you were trying. I thought you were angry all the time. But now I see you were just tired of being invisible." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that could undo the years of silence. But her voice cracked. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You didn't just win. You changed the game." When the call ended, I sat still for a long time. It wasn't closure, but it was a beginning. Now, 6 months later, we've launched a leadership program for women in tech who are passed over. Not a scholarship. Not a campaign. A real space. Full-time hires, executive mentors, startup seed support. The first cohort is already building things that scare even me with how bold they are. Every day, I walk past the wall outside my new office. There's a plaque there now. It doesn't say CEO. It says founder, architect. Not to be underestimated. And every time I walk past it, I remember the party they invited me to when they gave my title to someone else. And I remember what I did next. I bought the company. And then I rebuilt it on the bones of their mistake. Not for revenge, but to prove, once and for all, that no one can replace the original architect, especially not with someone who only knew how to stand in the spotlight, but never how to build the stage. The air in the office felt different now, lighter, maybe. Not because everything had healed, but because the rot had been exposed and scraped out. When I walked the halls, I no longer saw a reflection of what had been taken from me. I saw the outlines of something new, something earned. But the thing about power, especially when it's taken rather than handed over, is that people wait for you to drop it. They whisper about when you'll slip, when you'll get tired, when you'll finally prove them right. And when you don't, they look for other ways to cut you down. That moment came on a Monday. My assistant entered my office with a look that wasn't panic, but something close. Tension covered by professionalism. "There's a story going live this afternoon," she said. A reporter sent a media inquiry asking for a quote before publication. I took the printed sheet from her hand. The headline wasn't up yet, but the outline was clear. Someone was alleging that I had used insider information to acquire the shares that gave me control. That I had colluded with Zurich, intentionally tanked company value for a better deal. The word manipulation was used 5 times in the first 2 paragraphs. My name was paired with phrases like strategic deceit, boardroom opportunism, and power grab. At the bottom of the page was the reporter's name. I recognized it immediately. She was one of the ones who had praised Alex during his appointment, called him a stabilizing presence in a transition fraught with emotional tension. She had written me off from the beginning, labeled me as volatile, whispered that I was driven by personal vendettas rather than merit. Now she was circling back. Only this time she had a source. My brother. I knew it before I confirmed it. He'd been silent too long. I'd almost believed he had moved on. But he hadn't. He was waiting, watching, gathering whatever scraps he could turn into a weapon. And now, he'd finally thrown one. The story was set to run at 4 p.m. I had 4 hours to respond. I didn't panic. I didn't call legal. I sat at my desk, opened a folder marked contingency, and reviewed a timeline I'd created over 6 months earlier. A list of every transaction, every board interaction, every audit step I'd passed.
Clean.
Documented. Transparent. But this wasn't about legality. It was about narrative. And if there's one thing I learned from being erased and replaced, it's that facts don't win.
Stories do. So, I told mine.
I drafted a post, not an official statement, not a press release. A personal note. Straight from me. It read, "They said I took what didn't belong to me. That I outmaneuvered my way into control. That I saw an opening and seized it. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did take it.
But not from them."
I took it back from a system that quietly pushed women aside and expected them to be grateful for being near the table. I didn't manipulate the board. I outlasted the assumptions. I didn't tank the value. I revealed what it was hiding.
I didn't steal anything.
I reclaimed everything. I hit post at 3:47 p.m. By 4:03, the article was live. By 4:05, my post had more shares than the article. Because people remembered. Not the rumors. The receipts. The silent treatment. The party I stood through. The truth I never shouted. The company I rebuilt. But the final blow didn't come from me. It came from Zurich. At 5:42 p.m., they released a statement confirming that my acquisition had followed all legal and procedural guidelines. They added a note. "Our confidence in Miss Bennett is not based on familiarity. It's based on performance, precision, and integrity." And then, without warning, the reporter's article disappeared. Pulled for editorial review. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I closed my laptop and went home. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city stretching out beneath me like a quilt of light. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who showed up early, stayed late, and never asked for more than a seat in the room she helped design. The girl who smiled politely when her ideas were reworded by someone else in a louder voice. The girl who was told she was too intense, too sensitive, too ambitious. I thought about her and wondered what she'd say if she could see me now. She wouldn't say much. She'd just nod and maybe breathe a little easier. But there was one last twist left, one I hadn't seen coming. It happened quietly, as most meaningful things do. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. It was handwritten, folded into a navy envelope. The handwriting was familiar, controlled, slanted. It was from Alex. There was no apology, just 2 lines. "You were never just better at the job. You were braver. I see that now. I hope you build something I never could." I stared at the words. And for the first time, I felt something strange. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just peace. He didn't get to rewrite history, but he acknowledged the truth. And sometimes that's enough. Today, the company is thriving, profitable, respected. But that's not what I'm proud of. What I'm proud of are the changes you can't see in a quarterly report. The meetings where no voice is talked over. The boardroom where every seat matters. The team that looks more like the world and less like a mirror. They used to say I was too quiet, too serious, too blunt. Now they call it leadership. When people ask me how I did it, I tell them it wasn't magic. It was just math. I added value. They subtracted it. I did the equation. And when the numbers didn't lie, I didn't either. They replaced me with my brother. At the promotion party, I didn't clap because I was proud. I clapped because I knew they'd just made the biggest mistake of their careers. They thought the story ended that night. But I was just sharpening my pen. And now, it's written, permanent, quiet, undeniable. Not a comeback. A correction. And this time, I didn't just take the seat. I redesigned the table.